Hello, everyone.
You're lucky that I cannot currently replace you. Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Nerd Switch podcast. My name is Dylan, and joining me once again today is my good friend and fellow nerd, Jeremiah.
Hello, everyone.
Finally in the double digits.
Woo! Number 10.
Originally, if you remember in our last episode, we were planning on doing a discussion on the gaming industry this week, but we just kind of had to shuffle some stuff around. So instead, today we're going to be giving you guys a review of the Callisto Protocol, one of my personal most anticipated games for this year, as a true Dead Space fan. So structure-wise, we're going to lay it out pretty similar to how we did our God of War review, just rolling through different aspects of the game, but we're just going to kind of give our general thoughts on it, let you know what we thought of the game, and answer the question once again, does it live up to the expectations and the hype that everyone had leading to its release?
We'll avoid spoilers at first and maybe delve into a little bit towards the end.
Yeah, we could have a little powwow on the story. So with that, let's go ahead and flip the switch and dive into our Callisto Protocol review. That's enough! So the first part of the review here, we're just going to talk about the story. So to give a kind of brief synopsis on what the game is about, you have your lead character, Jacob Lee, voiced by Josh Duhamel from Transformers fame. And it involves him essentially running a cargo run from the... They're both moons, right?
Yeah.
On Callisto. So from the moon, one of Jupiter's moons called Callisto, to another of Jupiter's moons called Europa. And it's established that they've just been kind of running stuff back and forth, but very early on in the game you see that they're boarded by this terrorist faction, which then leads to them crash landing back on Callisto, which then leads to them both being taken to Black Iron Prison, which is the main place where most of this game takes place. And if you're familiar at all with Dead Space, this is a game that was actually created by a lot of the people that worked on the initial Dead Space, so there's a lot of similar beats story-wise and gameplay-wise that we'll kind of talk about. But yeah, just to give you that rundown on the story, we're just going to talk about our general thoughts on it without giving any spoilers, kind of what we like, what we didn't like. I'll start with you on the story here. What did you think overall?
I actually really started enjoying the story. It is kind of like slow at first to pick everything up. The story itself, it's one of those things that you just have to really progress through, and it's finding the audio logs to kind of understand a little bit of the story of what's been going on.
Yeah, there's been a lot of reviews. It is a game that's kind of getting a little critically panned, which we do both have complaints that we'll kind of dive into, unfortunately. But the one thing I kind of disagree with a lot of people on is the complaints regarding the story. Like, it's true, the game doesn't really fill you in on a lot of the more specific lore until you get through the halfway point. But it gives you a very simple premise to begin with an A to B structure as you're advancing the game's objectives, which does call back to Dead Space, because Dead Space 1 story was very similar.
Yeah. I feel like with Dead Space 1, I mean, it gave you your first objective is, like, you're here to help and assist this spaceship. The people on there had a distress beacon out. You're there to investigate.
Right.
That's kind of that premise. But with Callisto Protocol, all we know is we are a cargo ship that is delivering cargo. We learn from kind of exploring that they've been going back and forth to Europa. And then now we're being attacked by a terrorist group, crash landing on a planet that we don't know anything about.
Yeah, I actually think the whole initial hour of this game was really good. Everything from the setup.
It's definitely like good. Like I do enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the differences there. Like at least we have an intro, a start for Dead Space, whereas this one it's kind of like piecing it together still.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty straightforward with the intro because the ship crash lands, you get the like chief security guard of the prison played by Sam Whitmer.
Great actor, good job.
Whitwer, one of those.
It is.
So yeah, after you shortly crash land, Sam Whitwer shows up with a security force from Black Iron Prison, and initially they're just looking to take in the female terrorist who's with them, but then he gets a transmission from the warden of the prison who then tells him to also bring Jacob. So you're then piecing out the story from there. And yeah, it doesn't give you a lot initially. It's very much a blank slate, and you're left just to kind of figure out what's going on because it doesn't take long at all after you're moved into the prison for the game to really kick off with what it's driving, which those who've seen the trailers, those who know anything about the game know it's
a horror survival. Yeah.
Similar to Dead Space, it doesn't take long for stuff to go wrong in the prison. There's an outbreak, and you get this initial sequence where you break free from your cell, and then you're just kind of navigating through the chaos, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I love that first scene when you're in the prison, just kind of having to like rush out. Things are going crazy. Everything's on fire and exploding.
Mm-hmm.
And your goal is just to get out of there alive.
Right. So yeah, without giving any spoilers to the story, just as you progress, you're moving through different parts of the prison, you're interacting with different people, and you do end up getting an objective to complete by the end of the game. But like we mentioned, it's very much an A to B game, kind of, if you think back to Dead Space where it was like the initial objective was just to repair the ship, but then as things continuously went wrong or got diverted, you got new goals, new tasks, things kind of shifted, and this game follows a lot of the same structure. But we won't dive too much deeper into the story until we kind of talk about the spoilers. But what I do want to talk about with the story is just the particular things that we liked and did not like. I already mentioned that I like the story's simple premise. It does follow closely to Dead Space 1 structure as far as storytelling goes. So I did enjoy that, and I also think just the location for the story is really good with Black Iron Prison.
They did some really amazing takes. Like, I love when you would like get this just window view of the planet Jupiter. Mm-hmm. You see some of the other moons, right. Or just seeing like where the map all is and where you're going to be able to go.
Yeah, and I mentioned this to you outside of the podcast, but one thing I love that video games do is they'll give you that moment where you see your destination far off in the distance, and then you're like, for me it's always exciting because I'm like, oh cool, how am I going to get there?
I love that too. Yeah. I really do, because I've always noticed that in games like Bloodborne, all the FromSoft games, you're always able to see these locations in the distance, and you're like, oh, I'll be over there maybe some point.
Yeah. And then as far as what I didn't like about the story, there's not too much. I mean, it is kind of a shorter game, but that's more to be expected with survival horror, but maybe I would have liked a little bit more just time-wise for the price, but which we'll kind of dive into later. But
I'm hoping with that, because like, yes, it is a high price. If you do buy the Season's Pass, they are going to be adding more to the game.
Yeah.
Do I wish they would have charged us for it? Not really.
Yeah.
That's also a lot of opinion. But I'm hoping they say they're going to be adding quite a lot to this game, so I'm really hoping to see that time still bumped up into actually coming back to it.
Yeah.
Because the one thing with Dead Space is Dead Space had you did have a little initial longer period to play. You had a little bit more variety in that play, and I believe it had New Game Plus.
It did, which I guess that is a complaint more for the story, is just the game did not launch with New Game Plus, even though it was very clearly designed for it.
Yes.
And that we'll kind of dive into when I get to my major complaints, but that is one of them.
Yes. And with this game, I'm just hoping that it's kind of up for debate. We'll probably talk about it more in a future podcast as well, is that we're releasing games with not everything out, and it might they're planning to add more, which can then extend that time.
Yeah.
Kind of has a reason to come back to it,
Right. Yeah, when we get to our gaming industry video, that's a big topic I think that a lot of studios continuously fumble with.
Yeah.
Because this game did have a rough launch. Not so much for us on PlayStation, thankfully, but
You poor PC users.
yeah, PC people had a very rough time because the game hardly worked as far as the frame rate goes on launch, which I think they've rolled out a couple patches, but I don't know if it's doing much better at this point. But yeah, so the other thing with the story, I'm fine with it, but I could see it being a problem for other people, is just that the ending is kind of abrupt and it ends on a cliffhanger similar
It really
to Dead
does,
Space.
yeah. The ending was very quick. But I love that towards the end that it was building up the story, just
Yeah.
kind of just like adding more to it, but also giving us a lot of answers, which I really liked.
Right, yeah, it's not really a complaint for me. Like, I was okay with it. I could just see it being something that people aren't really a fan of.
Yeah.
But that's everything I have for the story. Was there anything else in particular you liked or didn't like with it?
I kind of felt the same for both of those. I loved the location. The story was really good for its being like a laid out story from A to B. Being able to explore this world, kind of seeing more. I kind of wished for a little bit more background from some of the audio logs. I feel like some audio logs would be like a good minute, minute and a half, and some maybe like 30 seconds.
Yeah, I didn't really get much from the audio logs from this one, unfortunately.
I actually collected them all. I got the trophy for it.
Oh, yeah?
It was funny because like I still didn't have all of them, I thought, but I guess I had them, which was cool. Even though I picked up one another minute after that trophy.
Yeah.
But I liked I always love audio logs. I love like the idea of like someone's perspective, like in the story, talking about their world.
Mm-hmm.
I always think it's really cool, and I kind of wish we would have gotten a little bit more of them.
Right. Yeah. So with that on the story, we can go ahead and jump to the next largest aspect. So we can jump on over to the gameplay. Everything from the mechanics, the combat, a little bit with environmental stuff. Yeah.
Skill tree.
So, one thing you can note with Callisto Protocol, I guess this is sort of a complaint, is it's just not very scary with the way the combat's done. If you remember back to Dead Space, the reason Dead Space had more tense combat, in my opinion, is because there was more like resource management involved and a little bit more scarcity.
Yeah, you had a lot more. You had less items, and then it was you wanted enemies to stay at a distance.
Right, and this game very much kind of changes places with Dead Space, because Dead Space you had gun combat with minor melee combat, which was more like a last resort, where this game kind of swaps it, and your focus is melee combat with a emphasis on gunplay, which is pretty minor.
The gunplay I felt like built up way later. I don't know if you collected a lot of the schematics.
I collected
And
them,
built
but
them?
I didn't build a lot of them. I kind of stuck with the two guns the game gives you.
Really,
Yeah.
I built the skunk gun, and I used that thing constantly because it was such a good weapon.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, I found the assault rifle schematic, and that again was a super useful gun. I actually used that weapon way more than I did the riot shotgun.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, the riot shotgun to me was so underpowered. There is towards like part of the gameplay is the stealth area, and I was like, okay, well, there's a lot of these guys down here, close range. I'm gonna pull out the riot shotgun. I just upgraded it.
No,
I put like 2 bullets into one of them, and it didn't stagger them or do nothing. I was like, well, this gun sucks.
I stayed stealthy that whole section.
I did for a few times, you know. I mean, like reverse it. So I was stealthy for the majority, yes.
Yeah.
But there were a few times I brought the weapons out and was like, okay, I want to get some more ammo or some items here.
Yeah, so let's touch on the core concept for the actual combat here, which is very much melee focused. You see very early on in a tutorial, which I guess I just didn't see this when I watched gameplay reviews, or I don't know if it was revealed, but the second the game told me to dodge, I was like, what? So yeah, it's a game where its core combat focus is melee with dodging. You use your left thumbstick to actually dodge and maneuver while you're in combat, attacking with heavy attacks, light attacks. And initially, it was very jarring for me because it's not what I expected for the game. I thought it would be more close to Dead Space as far as the gun combat.
I mean, I like a good dodge system though, and I felt like because with games like God of War was our last game, that one has an evade mechanic where
Right.
you can press the button and you'll move in the direction you're going.
Yeah, this one's just kind of weird because they have it tied to the same thing that you move with, which can create some awkward interactions. Whether it be like dodge, I don't know. It can be kind of weird, but I did end up getting used to it. It's just that initial shock took me a little bit to adjust
There
to.
was a few times it took me a little bit to adjust to it. One thing that I actually had a better thing using is because a lot of this game was I still tried to keep my distance. I only went into melee if I needed to or was able to.
See, I just went straight to melee every time.
Yeah, and see with that though, what I was doing is I kept my distance, so I was always holding back, which back is also your block option.
Yeah.
And that actually saved me on so many accounts because I'm constantly holding back. I was always constantly blocking, which I really enjoyed. That even if I was like in the middle of a swing or something, I could be pressing back and it'll actually still use my block animation.
Yeah, the block I personally did not use a lot because blocking you actually still take damage in the game, so I preferred much more just to dodge. The game has its own kind of sequencing where you would have like dodge, attack, dodge, attack. Kind of you have to watch for when the enemy's going to do a follow-up, which that was the part that kind of took me the longest to get used to because there was a lot of times where I would be like dodge, go to attack, but then they attack again and I get hit out of it. And it created some frustrating encounters early on, especially when the game throws more than like one or two enemies at you, which kind of ties into one of my complaints with the gameplay, but we'll talk about it.
See, that means that if you were very more melee focused, that could be a lot of reason why, like, when you had multiple enemies, it was a little bit more challenging. Because, see, I still used the hand cannon a lot at first, but when I fully upgraded it, I could, like, take one enemy out of the equation altogether because I knocked him on the ground, I shoot out a leg, and he falls, and then I can melee focus on one, and by my end of the combo, he's either down or the other one's getting back up, and then I just shoot him again.
I just don't think the game sets itself up to let you try and do mostly gunplay. Cause
the worst part is when they're behind, like you have one in front, one behind.
Yeah.
That is impossible because you cannot turn around.
Yeah, you can't.
And they will both just swing both at you.
Yeah,
and you can't do anything.
There's my first kind of introduction to being frustrated with this game was an early sequence. When you're fighting one or two enemies, the combat can feel really good and responsive, but there's a sequence early on where you get 4 enemies thrown at you at the same time, and I just couldn't handle it initially. I was getting hit from behind, enemies were grabbing me and throwing me another direction, and then I was getting hit by those guys from behind, and it just got a little frustrating because I'm like, okay, the game does not give me the tools I need to deal with this. Where
you just didn't grab the tools you needed to deal with
it. That early in the game, you don't even have a gun.
Okay, so this was pretty early. I wasn't sure where it was.
This is like in that initial jailbreak sequence.
So it's like around here.
Yeah. So yeah, just a couple of encounters that are a little frustrating because the game's mechanics, I just don't think were really designed with that in mind. Because there are times when the game does give you the tools to kind of alleviate that pressure with combat. You get a telekinesis grip later on. You get better weapons as you play the game. You can upgrade stuff, but early on it can be frustrating. A lot of times too,
I always noticed was like when there was a large group of enemies, we'd have the explosive tanks that would be around on the ground.
Yeah,
and I'd use those to my advantage. Then I love the spike walls like everywhere. Not sure what the actual use of those are in that world, but they're there. And I would definitely, like, if there was a large group of enemies, especially the ranged one, where it's, like, spitting at you.
Yeah.
I'd throw that thing into the spikes and just get rid of it so I don't have to deal with him. And then I can focus on the others.
Yeah, it gives you the tools to deal with those situations, but sometimes due to, like, whether it's your character's slow movement or the cramped environments, it can still be kind of difficult.
There are definitely things that can cause an issue. Mm-hmm. Like you said, the small environments, especially. And with the dodge mechanic, there'd be times I'm needing to dodge the enemy's attack. Well, I just dodged into a wall, so now I can't back up or move.
True. Yeah, there are a lot of janky situations like that. One during the final boss, your character just moves so slow sometimes because I was trying to run over and pick up a canister to like chuck, and I just couldn't get there fast enough, or I'd be trying to grab it and my telekinesis would miss, and yeah.
There's definitely times too where it's like I'm running, I'm using my sprint option, and I'm running away, and I turned around. The boss or enemy is just 10 times faster than you still. So it's like your running is pointless when it comes to an enemy.
Yeah. I almost think, I don't know, maybe if they would have tied the dodge to a different button and gave you, like, I don't know if you've played the Arkham games, but they give you like an indicator when you're about to be hit from a different direction. I don't know how that would have worked with this game, but maybe it's kind of nitpicky. I do like the game's gameplay overall.
The problem with Arkham games, I mean, those have an actual evade still.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe if they tied it to a different button instead of the like directional dodge.
So you actually just have like an evade kind of thing? Okay. I definitely do think that it would have been a different kind of story altogether if you had like an actual evade rather than tying it to just like directional control.
Yeah, and I'm not saying like I hate the game's combat. I'm just saying I like it overall, but there are situations where it shows kind of its weaknesses and can be a little frustrating. But that aside, we can go more into the gunplay itself because the game, differently from Dead Space, your primary focus is not the guns. They're more there. The game kind of introduces this mechanic where you'll, as you're doing melee combos, you'll then get a chance to do a quick shot at them where you can fire the gun to kind of do extra damage, which I used that quite a bit, but I didn't find myself prioritizing just shooting in general.
Yeah, I only kind of use shooting here and there. The stealth enemies, the ones that can turn invisible, that's one I use the skunk gun for.
Yeah, you kind of have to with those, because I would, like, try to run up and melee them, and then they just get an animation attack and, like, hit me back, and, like, come on.
Yeah, you either throw them with grip, or to kind of stagger them for a moment, because then you can melee them a ton.
Yeah.
Or I would just use the skunk gun. Like, that gun was great to just stagger them on the ground, and then I could finish them with a melee.
Yeah, I did, like I mentioned earlier, I just stuck to the initial hand cannon and the riot gun, and I just fully upgraded both of them. And they were good. Like, the opportunities where the game does give you that quick shot during melee combat, if I had the shotgun out, that would often just kill the enemy once I did the quick shot. And it does tie in more later on when the enemies' kind of mutations are introduced. Once you do enough damage, some of them will sprout like a tentacle.
With the tentacles, and then it just one-shots them anyway.
Yeah, and you have to shoot the tentacle or else they mutate and become way more annoying. So that part I thought was actually kind of cool, because you do get the homage to Dead Space where you enter the one room and there's the blood writing on the wall that says shoot the tentacles, kind of like how Dead Space said shoot the limbs.
Yep.
So that I appreciated.
I enjoyed that there was the writing there. It was weird, though, that it was in multiple locations. Like, why is everybody writing this on the wall in their blood, okay?
Yeah.
Like, I can understand one person doing it.
Right.
But then even in the stealth area, there was, like, don't make a noise, like, 5 different times. Is gunplay still counting the grip as well?
I think it's kind of its own thing. So you do get, like, similar to Dead Space's telekinesis, you get a thing called grip in this game. There's a scene, you see the actual, like, prison guards in Black Iron use it as a way to control the prisoners. Like, you see Sam Witwer's character use it to freeze Jacob Lee in place at one scene. And then you later on in the game acquire one of your own to use, which allows you to, very similar to Dead Space, like, pick up enemies and throw them to create space, throw objects at the enemies.
And then, personally, it also gave you the biggest cheese in this entire game. That if there is a railing system that you cannot get over, just grab them and drop them over the railing and they instantly die.
I did that a lot.
Yeah, no, super useful. Although the biggest issue with it, you will not get your, like, items then.
Yeah. Trying to remember with Dead Space, because with Dead Space's telekinesis, it wasn't limited as far as like how much you could use it, right?
I don't think so. I don't really actually remember using it
The one,
too much on enemies.
yeah, the one thing Dead Space had, because Dead Space had kind of two different systems. Like they had the one you could use to slow stuff down, which that one you did have to refill. Like
yes.
It was called a stasis. But you also had the telekinesis, which I remember the game would kind of let you do as much as you want with. Which, if they did that in this game, I could see it kind of making it too easy.
Yeah.
But instead, this game limits you, I think, initially to like 2 or 3 uses before your battery for it or whatever runs out.
Fully dries.
And then you can upgrade it later on, and I do think it's a very good tool for the game. But I had kind of a hard time figuring out like when I had 1 or 2 more uses of it left.
Yeah, the bar for it sucked.
Yeah.
Because it goes around your neck, and sometimes you can't see it.
Yeah, I guess that's one complaint I have with this game's use of the HUD, which we'll kind of talk about that on its own here in a second. But the other thing I want to touch on with gameplay is, well, I guess we could do the HUD now and then this part later. But so Dead Space 1 had, at the time something that had not really been seen in games. Instead of having an actual menu, like a pause menu, or I mean the game has a pause menu, but instead of like a traditional inventory menu. It does it all like, what's the word for that?
I'd say it's like a POV because it's kind of like your character brings up his own HUD.
It does it in real time. So you're pulling it up as a hologram in front of your character. The game's not paused while you're doing so. And this game very much kind of does the same thing, except what I don't like as much is the health bar and the grip bar, kind of similar to Dead Space's like telekinesis, are much smaller, and they can be kind of hard to gauge, especially while you're in combat.
Yeah, because I mean, like, in Dead Space, the stasis bar is a little circle, like, on your shoulder.
Right.
And it shows, like, the bars and how full it is. Whereas in, and then the spine is your health, which can be upgraded, and it shows the upgraded bars. And then for Callisto Protocol, we just see the neck is his like health and HUD.
Yeah, so when he's taken into the prison, there's a scene where he's strapped into a chair, and then they call it a core, but it's like branded into the back of his neck. It's what's his life bar and everything like that. Which, for the most part, it's fine. There's just a couple times in combat, especially, where, you're moving around, dodging and attacking, and I don't even notice I'm at, like, 1 hit left, and then I'm just dead. So it's a lot harder to see, and the game does not give you an easy way to heal in combat as well, so if you get really low, you're kind of just in trouble.
I know. The healing mechanic, like, that was another thing that kind of bothered me, because, one, the health injectors cost $500 in the stores, so they were super expensive.
I didn't really craft them. The game did, I think, give me enough health just through like searching.
There are times I really could use one, and then of course I couldn't buy one.
Yeah.
And then I always had to just wait, and that was actually a flaw with some things because, let's say you're progressing through the game and you entering a room and you are low health, you don't always have a way to get extra health back. If you don't have an injector at that time, and if you don't have like a lot of health and you're just not to that skill level to clear everybody out in the next room, you might have to go back a few saves to try and redo it so you actually have health for that.
Right.
That's why I just felt like they didn't have enough available because they had 2 ways to heal. You had the health injectors, and then there was just pickups. I wish you could have stored those, and I wish they would stack.
Yeah, because when you do go to use an injector, it is kind of like its own little cutscene. Like, it's not quick at all.
During the tutorial for health injectors, it even states you are not safe while using these. You can be attacked, so it's like, well, that sucks.
Yeah, I think I can count the number of times I was able to, like, successfully heal myself mid-combat, like, on one hand.
Yeah, for sure. Especially during, like, a boss fight or, like, just a lot of enemies. It was always super complicated.
Yeah.
Because it's like those things are charging you. So it's like, well, I can't heal.
Right.
So what can I do?
Yeah, other features it does implement with its, like, real-time HUD is the inventory system, so you can pull up and deal with that, which I thought the inventory was fine, although I do agree that in the first half of the game, you just do not get enough space in your inventory.
There was way too many items where I prioritize currency over items, so my priorities go at least one. I actually had to lower it because I normally was like, I always want at least 3 health or like 3 heals, but I had to prioritize down to like 1 for some of it because it's like I need all of these things so I can sell them and start buying a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, this I don't remember if it gives you like 6 or 8 inventory slots initially.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I believe.
Yeah,
then it doubles it to another 8.
Yeah, but there's a lot of situations in the first half of the game where I was leaving stuff behind, like a lot of currency I didn't grab, which I wish I could have, because upgrades are pretty important in this game.
With this game, there was a lot of times I wish you could have gone back a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I could understand, like, door breaks, you can't reopen it. That's fine. That's your starting point. But there are times where you could have easily gone back, the door just locks behind you for no reason.
Yeah.
With these games, I'd love it if they would have, like, kept it so you could go back and grab stuff that you had to leave behind more.
Yeah, that's one thing that's interesting, because if the first Dead Space actually had a pretty good amount of backtracking, which could either be a good or bad thing, depending on what you think of backtracking in general.
Yeah.
That game used it quite a bit. This game doesn't have any, except for one technical part where you just revisit an area later on in the game.
There had a little bit of it. You could go back here and there to some parts, but sometimes it just... The one problem, too, was the navigation is if you went too far ahead, then you couldn't backtrack.
Yeah.
So then you were always like having to be careful about like, okay, how far can I go ahead? Will I find a buy station ahead, or am I going to not be able to go ahead? So then what can I prioritize on taking?
Yeah. One complaint I have with the way this game uses the HUD as well as with the actual audio logs like we talked about. So this game, when you find an audio log, you have to manually navigate to the data BIOS menu to play it. So it doesn't give you an option to play it when you pick it up. And more importantly to me, it doesn't give you an option to move around while you're listening to them.
Yep, also annoying. And then, of course, you have the story characters, if there's any in the background, or Elias is talking to you over your radio.
Yeah.
They're just talking to you through it. They're like, hey, hurry up. It's like, no, I'm playing the game.
Right. So yeah, I would have liked that to be implemented, because if you're trying to have your game not have like a menu HUD like that, then it is something that you should allow me to do.
There is one thing I do finally remember that I do want to add that they should have added to the game, and that is the storage locker. Because the first Dead Space, or the Dead Space games, the stores where you would upgrade and you could actually store things if you had extra.
That would be nice.
That would have been so much nicer. And then, of course, personally, they definitely should have thrown more stations around. It makes sense why there's not, but at the same time, you kind of need them.
That part I didn't mind too much, because I feel like it's pretty similar pacing-wise to Dead Space as far as how often you see them. Because with Dead Space, it was most often just like when you hit a new chapter.
As soon as you enter the area of like the train stopped, you entered that area, there's your buy station.
Yeah.
And there may be 1 or 2 around the map of that station. And I felt like this one, since it was so linear, if you passed one, you're not guaranteed to go back to it.
Right.
You may go back to it once or twice. That's wrong. You may go back to it once. But I feel like they could have been a little more. I feel like in a prison, for people that they had to, for guards needing to watch over, there wasn't enough guard stations to where it's like a room where the guards are the guards. They stand there, they're on their station, they're watching things. I feel like other prisons I've seen in other games have tons of those. Even on like your prisoner blocks, you've got it in the medical wings, guards are stationed in a office space. And I feel like that would have been a way that they could have implemented some more of those. Because, like I said, it makes sense that there's not a lot of them. Because these are for guards and staff, not for the prisoners.
Yeah. I didn't mind it too much. Like, yeah, there's probably a couple parts where I would have liked to see one a little sooner, where I was just having to leave more stuff behind. But I think that also could just be resolved by just giving us a few more inventory slots early on.
Yeah.
But that aside, the last thing I want to talk about with the gameplay is the skill tree and the upgrade system. So you do get, with those guard stations or the buy stations that we talked about, it allows you to put credits in to upgrade your resources, whether you're making your gun more powerful or giving it a enhanced like ammo capacity. Upgrading,
you upgrade your weapon,
yeah.
or you upgrade your baton. The grip allows more energy.
And my big flaw with this, with the game not having New Game Plus on launch, is it's like actually it's just not possible to upgrade everything in one playthrough. Like
Yep.
there's no way to do it, I don't think.
You'd have to sell so much. I got like for my baton, my grip, I have just the top 3 left, but each of those cost $2,000 in credits. They're nearly $3,000 in credits just to upgrade one more chip, and I've got 6 so far, so that's insane amount there. That's over 12,000.
Yeah, with my playthrough, I definitely prioritize the baton because there's a couple of upgrades on there that you really have to have to make the combat better. One feature in particular is that if an enemy goes to block a strike, your baton would just break their arm off.
Yep.
Which, once I got that, the combat got a whole lot better for me.
And then I got the grip leveled up enough that I was able to grab enemies and throw them when I needed to. I maxed out my hand cannon. That was like the first thing I maxed out, which the hand cannon's great. Do you use the alt fire mode a lot?
I used it mostly on the mini bosses, I think. Didn't really use it else otherwise.
I used it quite a bit here and there. I was always like pretty stocked on ammo.
Yeah.
There are times I misused it, so I'd be kind of short some ammo, but then of course I'd find it like right away.
Yeah. So yeah, I overall I like the upgrade system. I think there is a lot of stuff they could have done a little more with it in terms of
Let us upgrade our health.
Yeah.
Let us upgrade maybe a few other things.
Because I hate to keep comparing it to Dead Space, but I feel like, because it's very much set up as like a Dead Space-like game, so it's comparisons you kind of have to make. But, Dead Space 1 had like the suit upgrade system where you could find a new suit schematic.
That would have been cool too. Just as him being a prisoner, he still could have found some armor.
Yeah.
Or found a schematic to build some armor, some guard armor.
Right.
And he would have been able to wear that, and then when we get the suit, the full suit, that would have been like a 1 to 2 upgradable. It still includes your previous upgrades. And then, so that way you're increasing your resistance to damage. You have a increased health pool. And then an increase in your grip, the telekinesis.
Right. Instead, what this game does is it opts just once you get to the halfway point, it just gives you a suit, and then that's your upgrade for the game. You're not... Yeah. It just tells you have more health and more inventory space. But I would have liked to, find upgrades or just have a way to individually upgrade it myself, because in the early game it can make for some not so great situations. Another big part of the game, something that was big with the marketing of it, is the death animations. There's a lot. You will die in the game a lot. And because that's another thing that Dead Space did. You had these really gruesome death animations when an enemy would kill you. They'd be shoving their spike arm into your face or whatever.
Beating you to death, pulling you apart, all manner of gross stuff.
This game does the same thing and does a lot more of it.
Oh, yeah.
Almost to the point where it can become kind of annoying, because every time you die, you essentially have this extended cutscene, and some of them are pretty long. And you can't really skip them or anything.
No.
But I don't think they're necessarily a bad thing. I think it's fine. But I could see some people getting annoyed if they're dying a lot and constantly having to watch their character just get
brutally murdered.
Manhandled.
I guess I can comment, or with gameplay you comment here that it's not a scary game.
Yeah.
I kind of disagree. It has scary aspect. Scary in gameplay you've got here and there. I always try to play a game and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'd be terrified in this actual situation.
Yeah.
And that's where I try to bring out my horror. I just be like, oh my gosh, this would be terrifying. And there were definitely times things actually jump scared me. And like, because I just wasn't prepared for it. I do like some actually good jump scares you're not prepared for.
See, jump scares is where I have an issue with the game as well, though, because it
There are a
tries...
lot.
It tries to scare you a lot, but its jump scares are just not good. And some of them are actually very annoying. Like, remember all the scenes where the little worm alien thing would jump out and grab you? There's probably like 10 plus times
I know, I do
that
hate
happens.
that they would put them in crates, and then there would be nothing in the crate.
See, and that kind of gimmick is fine for like 1 or 2 times, but this game just does it over and over again to the point where it's so annoying.
Because it was kind of dumb, because that is something that they don't have any way to avoid. Like, you can't block them, you can't dodge it.
And that's another reason that makes them annoying, is if you get hit by the little larva or the worm, you're taking damage.
Yeah, you take damage. Yeah, like, I remember so many times, like, I just healed, and then I just get wormed for a few seconds. And I was like, really?
Yeah,
I just lost 0.2 health there?
Like, unless you memorize which lockers and boxes not to open, like, it's not optional. You're going to take damage.
Yeah.
And then, another thing with the gameplay, too, this is something a lot of people complained with, is just the game is extremely linear. This is something I don't really agree with as being a problem. I was okay with it. It's very linear. You're led from A to B. There's minor exploration, but it is really minor. You'll have, like, every once in a while, one optional path you could take to find some additional items to pick up, or maybe an audio log or something. And which I didn't mind. Like, I'm okay with games being linear. I don't think every game needs to be open world or semi-open world. So getting a story-driven linear experience once in a while,
Yeah, I definitely don't have any problem with a good linear story.
Yeah.
To following a straight path. I like to explore games like this. That just kind of reminds me of things like BioShock. BioShock, it's very linear, A to B, but there's exploring you can kind of do. There's no side quests.
Yeah.
Which I do enjoy those as well, especially in games like these. But that's not a requirement.
Right. Yeah, and I'm more just stating it for the people that do care about that. Because if you're coming hoping for the same level of like optional exploration that the Dead Space series gives you, you're definitely not getting it here. It is much more linear, more straightforward.
I mean, this game, they don't even give you like compass or map. Yeah. It's literally just follow the path. With that being the case, though, I still wish they would have given us something to navigate the area, because I don't want to miss something that I could have gone and seen.
Yeah.
Luckily, I'm just very thorough, and I made sure not to go those other directions until I made sure.
What I had to do, the way I kind of gauged whether it was an optional path or the way forward, is you go in and then you watch to see if you get a checkpoint or not.
Yeah, checkpoints are good ways to notice.
But yeah. Like, that's what's weird, because Dead Space 1 does give you, like, that directional system, which will just draw a literal line pointing you to your objective, which was good in that game, because that game had more side exploration, but I could see complaints, like, if they put that in this game, with how limited the side exploration is, people might be like, well, what's the point of having this here when you can hardly explore? Like, the game doesn't even give you a map or anything, which really shows that the game is not intending for you to explore a lot.
Yeah.
So it's something that would have been nice to see more of, but I'm not really like upset that there's not a lot of exploration, because I think it was fine. So yeah, to dive into kind of the general summary on like what we like and didn't like as far as the gameplay goes, just to reiterate it, like the combat I think is really good. It has weight and it is satisfying. It is reactive. But like we mentioned, there are situations where the game's design can kind of flip that and make it more frustrating.
Personally, the combat system does work. I think that thing that would have made it better was your movement speed.
Yeah.
Just being able to like actually move a little bit faster than taking a tiny tiptoe step to the left and right would have been way better and made way more sense. That, or just being able to, I guess it's not like a super requirement, but being able to actually hide behind objects. to where like it has to be line of sight for them to know exactly where you are.
Yeah, the game does have a dedicated stealth section, and it kind of toys with the idea of using stealth, which is cool because Dead Space didn't do that. But at the same time, it's only in a couple sections, and it's not really something you can optionally use.
There's times like if you enter a room, if you stay crouched, they won't be able to know where you are right away.
Yeah.
But if one of them sees you, then all of them see you. So like you can't re-enter stealth.
Yeah, another thing I liked with the gameplay was just the environments, the level design, the different locations you get to perform the gameplay in. I really liked.
I like that the environment is really good at telling a story.
Yeah,
it's really good at like explaining what's going on in this prison. I actually, that's why I brought up BioShock to begin with, is I had a lot of BioShock vibes for this game.
Yeah,
and I loved the idea of like the atmosphere just felt very similar.
Right. Yeah, I love to, because this game, you're navigating all throughout Black Iron Prison, so, like, you get the cell blocks, you get a lot of, like, the under part, like, there's a part where you're going through the sewers and kind of crawling through the pipes and the water, which I thought was cool, and then you move on to an area called, like, the Habitat Dome, and there's just some really cool parts of the prison you get to see. And then, of course, later on, going, like, outside the prison and seeing kind of what the moon of Callisto looks like on the outside. So I really like a lot of the environments, and they're just really well done, which when we get to talking about, like, the visuals and the graphics and stuff, this game has a lot to offer. But yeah, other than environments, just stuff we already mentioned, like, I like that it has similarities to Dead Space in terms of its general design. There are some things I wish they would do better, like if you're already trying to copy a lot of what Dead Space does, copy it better than you did in some parts. And then just the upgrade system I did enjoy overall.
I'm glad they didn't have a stamina bar.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Oh, yeah. No, that would be a nightmare.
Yeah, that'd be so
horrible. The bulk of what I don't like is what comes from the actual gameplay, because like we mentioned with the combat, it kind of stumbles when you fight larger groups. The inventory space is very limited. The lack of directional system hurts that minor exploration. Enemy variety wasn't, like, terrible in this game.
They have the few, because, I mean, you've got your basic kind of intro to the creatures, what they are.
Yeah, I guess my complaint with enemy variety, like, you do get a variety of, like, visually different looking enemies, but the way you fight them rarely changes.
Yeah, the way you're fighting is always kind of the same.
Like, there are a couple sections where you have to fight them a little different. Like, with the stealth section, you can opt to just stay stealthy and, like, assassinate them. But I guess I would have liked enemies to kind of force you to take different approaches, because that's one thing Dead Space was really good at with it. Remember, like, the little dudes that would crawl on the walls and just shoot you from a distance? Like, you had to prioritize taking out their tentacles from a distance and stuff like that.
That's one thing I wish they would have done a little bit better for the thing that jumps out at you that's in the little bag.
Yeah.
I don't remember. It never really got a name, but it has a vulgar name for sure. But
yeah.
those were probably my least favorite, just because that enemy, you cannot tell where it is unless you memorize its location.
Right. So yeah, enemy variety could have been enhanced just by kind of forcing you to approach enemies a different way, which they do minorly with, like, the shoot the tentacles thing and all that, but you're not really changing the way you play the game that much. Other than that, one of my more frustrating larger complaints, because the game has 2 bosses in it, one being the final boss and one being a mini boss, but the mini boss you have to fight 4 total times in the game. And the mini-boss does not change at all. It's extremely annoying to fight.
One shot kills you no matter what. And then it has basically 2 lives because it's 2 heads.
Yeah, this is what I would consider a major complaint, because it's just lazy. Like, I would rather have no mini-bosses than to fight the same mini-boss 4 times throughout the game.
Right.
And the way you have to fight this mini-boss is annoying, because you can't melee it at all. You have to...
Unless you down him on his knees, then you can melee him. But melee is really not even as useful here. You still have to do a lot of shooting to be able to even down it to melee it.
Right. So yeah, the whole like the way I had to fight everyone, it's basically dodge, shoot it once, dodge, shoot
It
it once.
honestly felt like a Resident Evil like power enemy
Yeah.
where instead of it not being able to die, you can kill it.
Yeah.
It just takes a while.
It was so frustrating because I'm essentially sitting there for like 2 to 3 minutes repeating the same action over and over again, like dodge, shoot, and you're doing the same thing for like
The best
3 minutes.
thing I did for those was I always got like an item like in the middle of me here, like some random crates or whatnot, and I circle them so that I can get around.
That's just not fun.
I mean, of course it's not fun. Well, there's nothing else I could do.
Well, I know. I'm not saying there's a fun way to fight this mini boss, and that's the problem with the mini boss.
It's like, just if you could have used a grip on it to like give yourself more space.
Yeah.
To being able to actually interact with this thing so that it doesn't just one shot kill you every single time.
And then it gets even more annoying because after you fight it the first time, the next 3 times you encounter it, there are other enemies who also attack you at the same time, which just became at some points extremely frustrating.
Yeah, because the whole thing is you have to keep them from getting around behind you and whatnot.
Yeah, so I think it is a horrible mini boss design. I would never want to see this thing.
It still weirds me out too for the fact that like the first one I fought, this boss like I died to it like 4 times because I just kept getting that one little hit.
Yeah.
And the weird part is like the last time, the 5th try, I used the skunk gun. And I just killed it in like barely a magazine because I shot the heads and it took them out.
Right.
It just killed one and then I shot the next one and it took it out. It's like, well that was fast. But then none of the other bosses would do it. And that's what bothered me so much. Is okay, why did this one die so much faster and none of the other ones could? Like if that had like that'd be kind of like a better way of seeing it is if it had like a dedicated weakness that if you just shoot it in the head like 5 to 4 times with a heavy gun, then it just takes it out. I would have been way fine with it.
Yeah.
Because at least then it has a way easier way to just get rid of it.
Yeah, my complaint too with it, like if you're giving us an enemy that we have to shoot to kill, make it easier for us to create the distance with it because.
Like they could have given us a weak spot on the leg, so that we can like stumble it, so that it's slower. Because that's the other thing. This thing is twice your size, and running away sometimes did nothing. To where I was totally looking away from it. I'm running around trying to get around a corner or something, so I can start shooting again. And this thing's arm just swings and scrapes the back of me, and I'm dead.
Yeah. I just can't express how frustrating the gameplay of fighting these guys are.
Yeah, like. It didn't work out as well. Personally, I think nothing should ever one-shot kill you, but especially just a scrape. Like I can understand if it was doing like a big charge attack or something, but just like a little, that's not gonna kill me. That's like getting knifed in the foot in Call of Duty and you die.
Yeah, another part with the gameplay here. There is a lot of crawling and shimmying through vents and between narrow passages. It's been something that's popped up in a lot of games in the past. It's referred to as like a pseudo loading screen where the game forces you to like slowly crawl between a wall as it renders the next area. This game has like I did a second playthrough of the game and I had a little note open while I was playing where I was noting down every single time the game made me crawl through a vent or shimmy through a wall. And there is like 70 instances of the game making you do this between crawling and shimmying, which I think is just mind-blowing.
That's a little ridiculous with how many there are.
Like, I don't mind it in terms of traversal, because some of it makes sense, you know, as you're going through the sewers.
You have crawling. Like a locked door, and you use the vent to get into the room.
Yeah, it's just the game does definitely overuse it, and I don't even think the game has to, because there's no way that this game is struggling to load that much. Considering like how linear it is,
I know the rooms are so small. Like, I don't know if it's like I wouldn't say it's like super detailed. For every single room.
Like I almost want to make the case that maybe they used it just to legitimately pad out the runtime.
Yeah. By
like forcing you to slowly navigate some areas, and like it is something to be aware of, and it's not necessarily frustrating. It's just the game does it so much. Like there's certain sequences in the game where you'll shimmy something and then immediately have to shimmy something else as you're navigating, and you'll have like a solid minute or two at a time of you like crawling and shimmying to get to a new area.
Yeah, and then they do like the cheap jump scares in the vent too. One of your other issues is you don't like your being magically cleaned.
Yeah, this is a nitpick for sure, but there was like we talked about, there's a sequence where you have to crawl through the sewer, and you're like walking through doo-doo water.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see your suits.
Yeah, you get pretty gross. Your clothes are all brown, spotted, and whatnot.
I remember one part, like you go out of the water into a vent, you crawl through the vent, and then as I got out on the other side, I'm like, my suit looks spotless.
I'm all clean. There was a secret shower in the vent, that just kind of sprays you down as you crawl through.
Right. That, and like every time you kill an enemy, you're getting blood spatter all over yourself. And there was one time I sat there and watched my suit to see like when it would disappear, and it just like shrinks up at one point. I'm like, that's not how blood works. And I get it. Like you don't want to walk around just being red the whole game, but
have you not played Bloodborne? You're drenched until you die or until you clean yourself.
Yeah, so it's not like it's a major problem with the game. It's just, I guess it kind of broke my immersion at one point. Because I'm like, ew, I just crawled through doo-doo water. But then I'm like, oh, I'm spotless now.
Oh, I'm all clean. I don't smell anymore. I'm probably fine.
Yeah, this might be one of my major complaints. I'm not sure where I listed it, but there is a pretty big problem with checkpoints and manual saves.
Yeah, they suck. That's what they do.
I don't know if it's something they've fixed quite yet, because we did get like 2 patches.
Nope, still not fixed.
But yeah, there's the manual save, for whatever reason,
does not work and is completely pointless.
Yeah, like it's automatically overridden by your checkpoints, like the autosaves the game gives you. And there were a lot of sequences where I would be in a room, like with the power station, the upgrade station or whatever. I would go through, buy a bunch of upgrades, sell my trinkets or whatever to get the extra credits, and then I would go to an optional area and have to fight some enemies. And then if you die, because the game does not give you checkpoints when you leave the upgrade room.
Yeah.
I then died and respawned. You
have to redo all of your stupid freaking upgrades.
Yeah, and I had to go back to the upgrade station, rebuy all my upgrades, and then I tried getting around it by doing a manual save every time I entered an upgrade room, but then lo and behold, checkpoints overwrite those manual saves.
Yeah, yeah. If you get a checkpoint, and let's say you do a manual save, you get a checkpoint, that manual save now means nothing. You can't go back to it. The saves that are manual are literally useless.
Yeah, like they do not function in the game at all.
Yeah.
I even tried loading manual saves and it loaded me to a checkpoint.
Yeah, what's even stupid is if let's say you have you've been playing for a bit, you have 6 minutes away from your last checkpoint. Mm-hmm. If you manual save and wanted to leave the game, guess what? You're spawning on your checkpoint. Your manual save is deleted.
Yeah, it can lead
That makes zero sense. It's a manual save of the location and everything you have done.
And it can lead to you replaying 2 to 3 minutes at a time of gameplay, and it gets a little frustrating.
When I first found it out, I was so annoyed because I had done a whole side area totally fine.
Yeah.
Didn't have no problems at all fighting some enemies, and I get killed by a stupid worm while trying to spam triangle, and I thought I hit it all, but I just died anyway. Yeah. And I was like, oh, well, at least I saved before this, so I tried to progress onward when I respawned, because I had saved in the exact same spot that I respawned in.
And you would think it would be an easy fix, because just make manual saves functional and give us better checkpoints.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a pretty big problem in the game, because it involves something not functioning how it should.
And I don't know, the only thing I do know is that when you go to your saves now, it says that your checkpoints overwrite saves. Mm-hmm. And if they're trying to say, oh, well, that's just how it's going to be, then you screwed up. Yeah, and you need to do something about it.
If that is the case, you have to have better checkpoints.
Yeah, you need to fix that, because that is not an okay system.
Right.
At least Dead Space themselves, you could go to a save station, and then you would just save and be there when you come back.
Yeah, so that is a big problem to be aware of. This is something I assume they will probably fix because, I mean, that's just kind of unacceptable in terms of, like, trying to progress the game. Other than that, this is kind of a mix between a legitimate issue and a nitpicky issue, like, because this did break a lot of immersion for me in the game's stealth section.
Yeah.
There's a large portion of the game where you're introduced to the concept of these blind enemies who react to sound very similar to, like, clickers from The Last of Us. This game has you, throughout this portion, you can, like, crawl to avoid them. And one thing I noticed early on is it gives you the option to silently take down these enemies. I'm going to put
silently.
Big quotes around silently here. Because I went to assassinate one, and mind you, there was another enemy close by. But you just pull your baton and you're like smacking this thing on the back of the head. It's extremely loud.
It's not the baton. It's his wrench.
Yeah, his little shiv wrench or whatever.
Wrench. You slash, but you grunt. Like you're like,
you're like grunting, stabbing,
slash, and like just super loud,
slamming him down on the ground. And I'm like, okay, there's no way that enemy didn't hear that.
And then you just go right to crouch, and you're just like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
What's even funnier is that crouch section. Like I tested it. I walked in front of an enemy crouched in that area. It doesn't notice you at all.
That's where I'm saying it broke my immersion, because there were points too, because those enemies in that section give you like 20 credits if you stomp on them.
Yeah.
So I was stomping on everyone, and I'm like, well, they just can't hear it, I guess.
Yeah, no, if you're crouched and you stomp them, they still won't notice.
Yeah.
It's if you stand up and do it, then they can notice.
And it is like a nitpicky issue, but that was pretty immersion breaking for me, because I mean, I'm in the moment. I'm like, okay, I gotta be stealthy. I'm into it. And then I start making a ton of noise, and I'm like, oh, they just only choose to hear certain things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just something to be aware of. And then, lastly, my complaints with the gameplay, kind of we already talked about, just an overuse of cheap jump scares. The game does it a lot. There are some that work better than others.
Yeah, honestly, like, it kind of works out on its first. The worm jumping out, the first one, that gets you. Maybe a second one that you're not prepared for.
Yeah.
Then you've got the, I still don't know what we're going to call them.
I think they're called
grapples.
larvae. Like the little...
Well, the little bug ones, those are larvae.
Oh, you mean like the wormy thing ones?
Yeah, the ones that like jump right out at you, bite you on the shoulder, and start pulling you in. Those could get me sometimes a lot. And especially the first few, because then you're like, it's that urgent, like, okay, I gotta hit the button. But they did kind of reuse them. I feel like they definitely should have been in a more prepared spot, because sometimes you just had to take the damage.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those things where it's like, well, I just healed up, I'm ready to go. You walk through the door, just...
I haven't gone back to see if you can, like, shoot the egg they pop out of.
You can shoot the egg to stop them before they even come out.
Yeah, but it's
But you can't see them for most of them.
And you would have already had to play through the game to know which ones actually do it. So yeah, just some interesting stuff. And there are also some jump scares here that made me just like straight up roll my eyes. Like the over the top, like enemy jumps in your face and it's like, wah.
I like the ones, the one good jump scares was like I'm opening a door and a dude just comes jumping right through it.
Yeah, see, that's fine. I'm talking about like the actual cinematic jump scare. Yeah. Like, remember you go to pick up the cube at one point and then your co-pilot like jumps up in your face.
Yeah,
and he's like, ah! And I was like, that's just that. I legitimately rolled my eyes because it's so bad. And the game does that a few times. There's like even a jump scare at the end, which we'll talk about, that they kind of try to retread like Dead Space's ending with it. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, ugh, it's so bad.
But I feel like overall those are kind of our likes and don't likes, I guess. So
definitely the majority of the game's problems for me do stem from the gameplay. And
there is one other gameplay problem that they need to fix as well for me, and that is the sprint is crap. And the fact that there are moments where it just don't work for reason at all.
I noticed that. There's like certain parts of the games, or the game where it just won't let you run. And I was like, why? I don't have a stamina bar.
No. It's literally like, my guess is it's the floor. It's because it's all gross, viney, and bumpy. So they don't want you sprinting on it for some random reason.
There's even points where it's like perfectly normal though. And I'm like it'll let me run and then it'll like stop me. And
that's true, yeah. And then sometimes it's just story-wise, like you're following some of the characters, and then it just doesn't let you sprint. It's like, okay, this is kind of dumb. I'm slow enough as is.
Yeah.
Let me at least do my tiny little bitty sprint so that I feel a little bit faster here.
Right. But yeah, gameplay gripes aside, we can move to some of the more positive aspects of the game. With this next part here, we're just going to be discussing kind of the audio and visuals, everything from music, sound design, voice acting, and of course the graphics, which this department of the game, it nails. I think it's...
Yeah.
I don't have any complaints as far as like the...
Yeah, no, I never had really any load issues. The look of everything just always looked really good. It looks really like it brings it out really well. It's like the horror aspect of this place.
It's a really gorgeous game. Like the graphics are fantastic.
There are a few things like I feel like things are a little too shiny. Like things can be reflecting in here. Like I'd be looking, I see like what I thought was an item, but no, it's just a wall metal. Reflecting a shiny light.
I mean, because your character's walking around with a flashlight mounted to them, and like...
No, he's not. He doesn't show it on there.
Yeah, look in the reflection.
Yeah, but it's not on his chest.
But it's in the reflection.
But it's not there. He doesn't actually have a flashlight attached to him. I looked for it. That's my biggest visual gripe.
Oh.
Because I looked for the flashlight, and there's nothing on the front of you.
I don't know. I think that part's like fine to me because if you shine a light on a reflective surface, it'll reflect.
Yeah, but it wasn't when I was actually shining my light. I was like, so let's say I'm looking this way, I could see it over there on the right, and it would still be really reflective and whatnot.
But yeah, like graphically, I think the game's pretty immaculate. I mean, like a lot of games you'll suffer with stuff like pop-in or stuff trying to load in the background.
I don't think this game wasn't big enough for stuff to do that.
And graphically, it's really impressive. Like the facial design for the characters looks really good. The enemies all looked great. I just like visually, this is a very pleasing game. Everything from like the dingy dark hallways, lights flickering as the electricity kind of stutters.
I feel like some of the enemies could have looked a little more because like when you get that close up, they look kind of grotesque.
Yeah.
But they look very dry. But when they're finally taking some damage, then it shows like a little bit of glisten on them. When they should be kind of goopy looking. Because their body is literally expanded and like exposed. Yeah. And I feel like they could have looked a little bit more touched up on.
I thought they looked good overall.
From like a distance, they kind of just look a little plain. Like you kind of see a little bit of texture in the skin. It's when you get these close-ups that you can kind of see it a little bit better.
Yeah.
Like I said, like I'm reflecting something that shouldn't be reflecting, but yet I feel like a body that's done this stuff should have had a little more reflection to it.
Yeah. You nitpicky.
Yeah.
Another thing with the audio and visuals, the music for the game is really good. You don't get like a large soundtrack or like extremely noticeable songs that appear throughout the game, but it's just the minor stuff, like the little hints of music as you move to new environments and all that fun stuff. And then just the sound design is really good. This is a game if you play, I highly recommend you use headphones because just it does a lot with the sounds from like enemies moving through the vents, lights flickering, your own footsteps in empty hallways. The sound design's really good.
Yeah, they did a lot really well there.
Last thing with the audio and visuals, just the voice acting, which I also think was very good. You don't get a lot of like actual actors in the game, like the ones we mentioned.
No.
Yeah, like you've got Josh Duhamel as your main character, who's going to do the most voice acting throughout the game, which I think he did a pretty great job.
And then there's I'm gonna mess up his name. His first name is Zeke or
looks like Zeke Alton.
Is it just Zeke Alton?
I assume.
Okay.
He plays kind of one of your early companions.
Yeah, he's your earliest companion who done dirty, unfortunately.
Wow, no spoilers. Yeah, Zeke Alton. His character Elias Porter, which I liked him. I
thought it was a great character. I wish they would have done more with it.
We'll talk about it. But yeah, just he's a good character. He's there. He's the one who initially gives you the shiv and like asks you to break him out. And he's established as being the character who knows his way around the prison. So he's kind of the guy who's guiding you from A to B for a lot of the game. And then Karen Fukuhara, who is well known for her role in Amazon's The Boys.
The Boys.
Who she was a really cool inclusion. I actually quite liked her character as well.
Yeah, no, she was a great character.
She plays Danny Nakamura, who's kind of like the head of the Outer Way terrorist group, quotations around terrorists, but that's something more with the story we'll talk about.
And with Sam Witwer there as Captain Leon Ferris.
Yeah, Sam Witwer, who I adore. He's an awesome voice actor.
Super amazing actor.
Unfortunately, he doesn't have the biggest role in this game.
No.
You only really, I guess, get to listen to him like 4 times, really.
Pretty much.
But he's there. He's good. He does a good job. And then lastly, I guess there's 2 other kind of bigger roles. You do have Louise Barnes playing Dr. Caitlin Mahler, who's kind of, the stereotypical doctor, somehow involved with the breakout and all that stuff. And then lastly, you have the warden of the prison, played by James Mathis III, Warden Duncan Cole, who's kind of your big bad in the story, who we'll talk about with how the story kind of wraps up.
Yeah.
But yeah, the voice acting just across the board is really good. I didn't really have any complaints. There's a couple of parts where I guess the facial animations kind of seemed a little off to the voice acting.
Yeah, a little bit in some of the cutscenes.
Yeah. Minor complaint, but just something to be aware of. And that's pretty much everything. Like I mentioned with audio and visuals, I don't really have complaints. I think this is the cleanest part of the game, where the game's like the most well put together, in my opinion. And then we can move to the last part, which is just performance, which for us PS5 players,
we have a problem at all.
Our I had no crashes. There was like some extremely occasional, very minor frame rate stuttering, but like it was hardly a thing for me.
Yeah.
And then like I said, no crashes. The game ran really well. There wasn't really any environmental pop-in or audio glitches. No gameplay glitches for me. But unfortunately, the people who played on PC have a very different story.
Rip PC players.
Yeah.
Buy a PlayStation. No, I'm just kidding.
And yeah, so that pretty much wraps up everything as far as breaking down the game. So we can kind of shift over to our final verdict here. And this is where it's kind of interesting, because I did give the game 2 playthroughs, and my initial rating of the game would have been a lot lower. But after playing it a second time, kind of having those expectations set for the combat and like how to approach the game, I ended up having a much better time with it. And for me, I think right now it's a 7 out of 10. However, with a simple addition, like if they just added New Game Plus, for me, I could easily bump this up to an 8.
Yeah. For me, it's definitely kind of similar. I actually had it a little bit lower. It's kind of around that 6 to a 7.
Yeah, there's definitely enough complaints I have where I could give it a 6, and I will admit there's a little bit of my survival horror fan bias ticking into giving it a 7.
I mean, for how the game and everything was, it is great. With some of the flaws, it does draw back. The lack of the New Game Plus draws it back. But for my current score, is what it is. It is current.
Mm-hmm.
This game has potential to go up.
Yeah.
So my potential score could be a lot higher. I could definitely see giving this an 8 to a 9 even.
Yeah. And like we already know that New Game Plus is coming. They said at some point in 2023 we'll get New Game Plus. We have the season pass content coming, which we'll see if that's good. Maybe we'll talk about it later on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, even if they just cleaned up some stuff and like added that New Game Plus, it could easily be a higher rated score for me.
Yep.
There's just a lot of jank in its current build.
Because like with how the game like plays out, the story, I really got into the story. I wish there was a lot more for it. I loved where the direction goes and how they kind of threw in this crazy twist towards the end, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then just where the direction of the game's going, I'm really curious to see and get to experience it more. So that's why like I definitely still have like a good hype for it. Mm-hmm. I'm ready to see where they take it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like we went pretty in depth. There's a lot of things the game does really well, and there's a lot of things that the game could do a lot better on. Like everything with the audio and visuals is fantastic. The game has a great attention to detail, whether it be like the parts where you have to break the glass to find some items. One thing I noticed early on in the sewer section, if you stomp in the sewer water, it splashes up into your character's face, and then he will start coughing as a result, which I thought was a good attention to detail. So yeah, like there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad.
It's crazy to me that I finished the game in one playthrough, but by the time I did that, you finished it twice.
Yeah.
And I'm still curious on how you explored every single thing I did everything I did, and still beat me twice.
So my first playthrough was kind of sporadic. I did like a couple hours here, went and did something else, because I wasn't like hooked in that first playthrough. I wasn't like dying to come back and keep playing, because I was initially a lot more disappointed with this game. Mm-hmm. And then as I adjusted to the combat and kind of set my own expectations of the game, I leveled out with it a lot more, to the point where, like, as soon as I finished the game, having the context of how it ends, I wanted to start a new playthrough, because I'm like, I want to pick up on some of these things the game's introduced.
I'm just terrible at that. I don't like losing all my stuff, and
yeah,
I made all my decisions that I wanted to. I explored everything.
Yeah, that, and I was also driven by, like, I was determined to get a count of how many crawls and shimmies there were. So I went immediately in for a second playthrough, and the second playthrough I found I was playing a lot longer at a time, and I was actually interested in playing through it. And yeah, so like my opinion did definitely adjust, and I did like the game more as a result of giving it a little more time and kind of having that initial expectation of what the game is. But yeah, it's not a perfect game by any means. Like, this game has a lot of work to do if it wants to continue as a franchise. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what the game does when its actual DLC comes out. Like, if you read the description on the Season Pass, we know we're getting a couple of game modes, we're getting some story DLC, some cosmetics. I hate that they're locking death animations behind a paywall, though. That feels like content that should just be in the game. And you can say it, like, here's one thing that had me worried early on, because we talked about this game and how excited we were for it initially. And one thing that got me worried, kind of my first red flag, was I looked up the review embargo. And the embargo for this game was set to the day of release, which is typically not a good sign for games. Like, if you look at God of War, its review embargo was set an entire week before that game's release, which shows a lot of confidence on the game studio side. Because they're like, we want people to see reviews before they buy the game. And that shows that they're confident with the product they're providing. But when a studio decides to not allow people to release reviews until the day of release, that to me comes across more as, well, we want them to buy the game before they see the reviews, which unfortunately is kind of the case that seemed to happen with this game. So yeah, it's just unfortunate.
Yeah, a bit unfortunate. I did bring up the roadmap as well, which our roadmap states that they're not going to even have a New Game Plus till February.
Yeah.
That is a very big downgrade for me.
Yeah.
That is why I'm sitting currently at 6 to 7 until then. And then a lot of it, like you said, the paywall just for death animations.
Yeah.
Not only is it death animations, though, they're also going to try and throw in skins for also in February. So it's like, we don't need, like, this should not have been paid for.
Yeah.
This should have just been a part of the game,
and
or optional to buy. Not a part of your season's pass. Content is what games need.
Right.
Not colorful skins that don't matter.
And this is a problem we're seeing time and time again with some releases, where the game is releasing in a semi-unfinished product, but they're immediately offering you microtransactions. And this game's Season Pass was available on launch, even though the game had a arguably rougher launch, especially for the PC people. When you're offering a product that was rushed out the door, but then immediately saying, hey, you should buy this additional content for it, it can kind of leave a bad taste in the mouth. And especially in this case where the game launches without New Game Plus, which I think is a feature that should be highly prioritized over trying to sell a Season Pass. So yeah, that is something to be aware of, and I will firmly keep this game at a 7 until some of these things are fixed.
Yeah, I just hope with more comes. I mean, supposedly we are getting a hardcore mode, and then the New Game Plus. So we're going to see how that all adds out and where it'll be. So the hardcore mode is going to be like, if you die, you have to restart.
Right. And I know it seems like we've been largely negative on the game, but one thing I do kind of want to express, like, this is not a bad game, not by any means. It's like a good
It has
overall.
potential.
Yeah, and I think once they do kind of fix it up a little bit, I think later on this will be a game that people will look at as kind of being underrated at the time.
Yeah.
And I do hope we get more from it. I would love to see a sequel if they like if the expansions are actually good and flesh it out a little more. I would be okay with seeing a sequel to the game, provided that they take the steps they need to take to make it better. And because it is an interesting story and it is an interesting world. One thing I kind of brought up to you, like as I was just on Spotify one day and I noticed there was an audio story available for the Callisto Protocol called Helix Station, which stars Gwendolyn Christie of Game of Thrones fame. And I actually went through and listened to that, and it was really interesting. Just it fleshes out like this whole side story that takes place before the main game. And it's an interesting world. So like I want to see more from it, but they have to release a better product to go along with that interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just kind of where I want to leave it there as far as rating the game.
Yeah, our verdicts are out. We've got potential to change them for sure, but it should be good. So if you want it, go try it. Give it a good play. A lot of people are watching a lot of gameplay out there too. So
I will say it's probably not worth full price, especially with games like on the PlayStation Store now costing $70. Like this game is not, in my eyes, worth that big of a price point, especially when you can go and buy God of War Ragnarok.
If that was a $70 price with that season pass, then yes. But unfortunately, then the season's pass price is like another additional $10-ish.
Yeah, and that's what makes it hurt all the more is like the game's launching without New Game Plus, but it's like so expensive.
So maybe wait till February, and then you'll have your New Game Plus. It's February 7th is their goal.
Yeah,
so.
and due to the critical reception of the game, I think the game will easily be on sale by then. So probably worth wait for a sale. I do think it's worth playing, but not one I would pay full price for sure. But yeah.
So there's our verdicts. Go check it out. Go check it out. Get spooked or don't get spooked.
That aside, we can kind of open up a little short discussion here just with the story, with spoilers included. Which, I mean, there's not a ton to talk about.
I only have a couple things I'm going to spoil for you people.
Yeah.
I don't know about Dylan here, but I only have 2 comments I want to talk about.
So just spoiler warning.
Spoiler warning starts now.
One thing I want to ask, because when comparing to Dead Space, you know how Dead Space had its artifact. Actually, did you completely finish the whole first Dead Space?
No.
Okay. Well, you had the artifact in Dead Space, which is revealed as being responsible for turning people into necromorphs.
Yeah.
This game kind of rolls it as a kind of Resident Evil-esque, like a biophage.
Yeah. Which it actually is what they call it in the game.
Yeah.
It is biophage. I couldn't remember if biophage was Dead Space or not. So now you said necromorph. Now I remember.
Yeah, so I like this game's angle. I like that it didn't completely retread what Dead Space did as far as explaining stuff. You do get similar elements because Dead Space had the church, which was the people that worshipped what this artifact was doing. This game has a faction I feel like it kind of hints at.
Yes, it's definitely something that they found this creature on during the mining excavations of Callisto.
Right.
And they found this dead creature, but it had larvae still existing inside.
Right. So that's one thing. The game takes you to this colony.
It was the first colony that was there built on Callisto.
Right, before they put the prison in. And it's revealed, like you said, they find the monster there, which has these larvas, which leads to the first outbreak, where people kind of turn into these biophages. And then what this faction kind of discovers is there's one person who gets infected by this biophage, but kind of retains their humanity.
He retained his humanity.
And they refer to him as Subject Zero, which kind of leads to them experimenting more and trying to basically... The game...
They want to evolve the human race. They believe that the human race belongs in space and wants to explore further. But to do that, they need to strengthen the human because the human is weak.
Yeah.
And so they learn about the incident on Callisto, which was like 75 years prior to the gameplay of Callisto. And they learn that the colony found that the monster, it had an outbreak because of it, and then there was the patient Zero.
Yeah.
But he passed away. We don't really get a full detail on how or what exactly happened, but they tried to replicate this, and they are trying to create him again.
And this is a story beat I actually really liked, because this is what leads to them building Black Iron Prison. So Black Iron Prison is built essentially as a research lab, but
they are using the prisoners as their experiments.
Yeah, the prison aspect just conveniently gives them like stock to test,
So
which I thought
totally
was cool.
wrong and illegal there.
Oh yeah,
but they're doing it anyway.
Yeah, so that part I thought was really cool. Like, just the warden's motivations I thought were good.
Which then that kind of brings up, like, the Sam Witwer's character. Was Leon
Ferris.
So, Captain Ferris. His character, like, he doesn't know anything that's going on. Right. I believe he knows, like, the experimental part on the prisoners.
Yeah.
But then the release of the biophages, he was not aware of what Cole was doing. And I'm not sure if then he finds Cole later or Cole finds him, because we know he falls out the window and somehow survives.
Right.
After that, we see him the second time, though, he is already then now infected. So my thought is Cole either found him and then did the experiment on him to turn him into his alpha, or he had already started the experiments on Cole or on Ferris.
What happened, and I think this is actually explained, because there's one really good line where Dr. Mahler is kind of explaining to Jacob, because this outbreak is intentionally dispersed
Cole
by
is
Warden
the one
Cole.
who did it, yeah.
And what she said was his reasonings is because evolution does not happen in a lab, it happens in the wild.
Yep.
So I think what happened with Captain Ferris is he just got infected as a result of, like, encountering those biophages.
Yeah.
And, with evolution happening in the wild, he becomes infected, but similar to Subject Zero, retains his humanity. And then Warden Cole... It's revealed Warden Cole's, like, watching everything from the tower.
I was wondering if then, was he actually watching it, or was he there?
Yeah, like, you see when you enter Warden Cole's tower room, like, he's got all the holograms on that center console, and it's, like, all the camera feeds. So I'm assuming he was keeping an eye on everyone, and what leads up into the conclusion of the game, so you see Captain Ferris come back as this, like, mutated humanoid. And then you see Jacob Lee enter, and the warden's been waiting for him because he's setting up this, like, demo of sorts where he's like, all right, look at our evolutionary monster here. He's now going to fight a human, and he's got these other people in the room, like, through holograms that are watching. And it's like a showcase. He's like, well, let's watch them fight and see who wins.
Yeah, they were kind of trying to decide if that was the humanity, like, would be able to trying to evolve themselves to fight this, or will the new evolution be able to win?
Right. And yeah, I thought, like, the whole setup for that, I thought was actually really good.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a great story. I was like, oh, wow, see, that was really cool. I was not expecting Cole to have, like, such an audience for him.
And another thing
I just don't get what was, like, because he, like, shimmered like he had, like, some force field on him. I thought he could have been a hologram as well. Or
like Captain Ferris? Or?
No, Cole.
Oh, no, he was a hologram.
Okay, because like,
you had the scene where Danny Nakamura comes in and tries to shoot him, and then the bullet just passes through because he's not, like, actually there.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if that was, like, him, like, having some weird shield, because otherwise I would have thought he just would have turned off, but it shows him leaving out the door.
Yeah,
as the hologram, though. That's what didn't make sense.
I assume it's just a hologram, but...
Yeah. But he does self-destruct, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like he sets the...
Maybe it was a robot clone, I don't know.
I think it's just a hologram.
That's what I'm going with, too. I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, and then another thing I did like was the setup with the game's lore. So like we mentioned, you have Callisto, you have Europa. It's established that there's also an outbreak that occurred on Europa, which Danny was involved in.
Yeah.
As we mentioned, she's kind of the head of the terrorist group Outer Way. But what's revealed, because you have the Outer Way as this like outlandish faction, and then you have the UJC, the United Jupiter Company, and this is something I recommend listening to that Callisto Protocol Helix Station on Spotify because it dives a lot more into the UJC and why people don't like them.
Mm-hmm.
But the UJC is established very much as being this like corporation, that doesn't care about the people. And it's revealed in the game, the Callisto Protocol, that the outbreak on Europa was a diluted test sample that, was likely delivered by Jacob, which he wasn't aware of course, but so he's in a way responsible for that initial outbreak that killed Danny's, the Outer Way leader's little sister. And the UJC flips it and presents it to the people as an attack caused by the Outer Way, to kind of cover their tracks a little bit. And it leads, of course, to Danny trying to, in the beginning of the game, board Jacob's ship to find out what they're smuggling, because she has an inclination that they're the ones who are delivering the biophage, which it ends up that they are. And yeah, I like her inclusion in the game. I thought Danny was a pretty good standout character. And in the end, you get a final sequence where she becomes infected, and then Jacob has to deal with Alex Whitwer's character to create a cure to cure her. They then deal with Whitwer or Captain Ferris in the final part of the game. Cole sets the facility to self-destruct, and then they make their way to an escape pod.
I think you said Alex Whitwer.
Alex Whitwer. Sam Whitwer.
There you go.
I was speaking real fast.
There you go.
But yeah, so they run up to the escape pod, and there's only one there. And you get what I thought was a really good scene where Jacob's character throws Danny into the escape pod with a tube of the biophage.
That he had collected because they had found that it was them smuggling.
Right. So that's one thing. This game... Because remember, very very on, how his co-pilot was kind of questioning what they were delivering?
Yeah.
His co-pilot knew something was wrong, but Jacob's character was more
He just wanted it over with. He didn't really want to put himself in the way or
I'm sure they knew they were doing something wrong, but he's we're just going to get paid and we're going to be done with it.
Yeah.
But later on in the game, you continually get these moments where Jacob's kind of haunted by his co-pilot, which does suggest that he has a little bit of guilt. And then he gets to the point where he realizes they were smuggling the biophage, and then...
See, another thing, too, that I wonder with that is with all the experiments being done and everything, he was already involved in something. So I'm wondering if he is also semi-involved even with the biophages. Because the whole voices in his head, the sound, the sound that would come in is he starts hearing whispers. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's a little more to that as well.
That they kind of explain as well. Remember Elias's character being the core they installed is going to kind of mess with your head a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think that's a part of it. But what I think the game is saying is that Jacob didn't know to the extent how he was involved in all of this. Yeah. But once it's revealed, he does feel guilty that he was essentially responsible for carrying the biophage to Europa, which led to everything happening with Danny and everything there.
Yeah.
So in that final sequence, you have Jacob throwing Danny into the escape pod, sending her away. He tells her he belongs there, which implies that he's owning up to his involvement with everything, which I thought was really good. And then, of course, and this is where it kind of retreads Dead Space 1's shock ending, cliffhanger. It's assumed as Danny's flying away that Jacob's going to die because the facility will explode.
Cole has set it to self-destruct. Right. It's exploding.
But then after you get a sequence where it pans back into Jacob fighting the biophages there.
Yeah, he was still fighting to the last breath. He wasn't just giving up.
And then a hologram of Dr. Mahler pops back up, and she found a way to temporarily stop that self-destruct sequence and then essentially asks for his help so that they can both get out of there.
Yep.
And then we get another not-so-great cheesy jump scare where
Captain
Ferris...
Captain Ferris comes pushing his head right in between the hologram.
Yeah, pops up from behind the hologram and he's like, rah!
Then it just hits.
So yeah, it definitely implies we're going to get some more from Jacob. I'm assuming with the DLC, they're going to probably find a way to escape Black Iron and continue the story from there, which I am curious to see. Like, I would like to get more from this story.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm, like, excited for, is to see where it goes.
And as far as the sequel goes, I wouldn't mind if they even just shifted it over to Dani, because I think she has a unique position as well.
She don't got no grip, though, so...
Yeah, she could get one. But yeah, so, like, overall, it's solid. I enjoyed what the story actually did, as simple as it was.
My input is they done my boy Elias dirty. His death was so unneeded and so out of place. Like, I just felt they were doing so much with him. And for him to just die like that, I was just like, really? That's his death?
I don't even think it was that bad. Because, like, you know, it leads up to the sequence where Elias helps him escape the prison, but then, you know, Captain Ferris shows up.
I think a better death would have been at least while working with Dani, something happens. Yeah. Not just the random being sent out of a airlock.
Yeah. Because
one thing I don't get is that's just an airlock. Well, there's gravity on the planet still, so why were they pulled out?
It's because remember when he was thrown out, he had that initial sequence where he couldn't get his visor to go down to like allow him to breathe because the air on Callisto is apparently hostile.
Yeah, because that's why they have the plants and the.
I actually like this whole sequence because Elias and Jacob are split up. You get him on the comms where Elias is then telling Jacob like his suit's failing and to help him. He sees the emergency beacon in the distance and makes his way to him, but by the time he gets there, you know, Elias's like visor had like an actual hole in it.
A crack in it, yeah.
So he essentially suffocated to death, which I thought the scene was good. I mean, yeah, it does suck that you lose Elias, but it also plays into the angle of where Warden Cole's like Jacob was doing everything he could to survive, and Dani poses the question like, do you care that he died, or were you just using him to escape?
I cared that he died. I don't care about Jacob's feelings here. Yeah. I liked him. He helped me. I like to put myself as my character. So, of course, I'd hate that. Like, that would suck. Like, yeah. I literally, like, I don't know this man, yet he is helping me, and I am helping him to escape this place.
Yeah.
Like, he does ask you, like, you start learning about it. It's like, what did you do to get in here? And apparently he's been there for years.
I like that scene too.
And you start learning that like he had killed somebody. He's like, what? Does that bother you?
Yeah, he's like, you know, there's the whole typical like, what are you in for? And he's like, Elias says, what, are you worried you're helping a murderer escape? And Jacob's like, yeah, well, kind of. And he's like, well, you are. But he's like, even explains it. He's like, you know, it was wrong place, wrong time. I was just defending myself, all that good stuff. So I would have liked to see more from Elias's character. But
that's why I feel like they could have maybe like injured him instead.
Yeah.
So that he could have gotten held back, but you still get to hear him talk a little bit more, and then something happened to him.
I could see something like that.
Biophage, not just the elements killing him. I feel like that's a little bit of a quick cop out.
I mean, I didn't mind it. I thought it was fine, but maybe something you would have liked more. If, say he survives and he's wounded, he makes it, like, through the colony with them. Maybe he just goes with Dani more since you're more separated. And then, remember, you get the scene at the lab where the mutated Captain Ferris shows up. Maybe we could have got something there where he, like, tries to slow down Captain Ferris and dies as a result.
See, that? Like, an actual farewell kind of thing. It's like, I've been here forever. You've been trying to help me get out. That's great. I'm out. I was able to at least get outside. You know, kind of just, he moved on and he was ready.
Yeah. Like, I'm okay with what they did, but
just a little more could have a little more couldn't have hurt.
So, yeah. I think as far as, like, discussing the story, that's pretty much what I wanted to touch on.
The last thing, then, is towards that end, is they kept calling him the Survivor. Mm-hmm. And then they would say a chant to it.
Yeah, they're like, Survivor.
They said something. I don't know what it is, but it really makes me think more along the story because Cole requested him specifically for the cargo delivery, and Cole has been keeping an eye on him.
Yeah.
So Cole knew something about this character.
I think it all ties in to the whole, like, evolution happens in the wild thing, too. Because when they're initially, like, Captain Ferris is at the crash ship, and then you get Warden Cole over the telecom telling Captain Ferris to also arrest Jacob.
Yeah.
I looked at it more as being like he knows, like Warden Cole knows he's about to unleash the biophage, and he probably just wants like as many people in the prison as possible for this whole test of evolution.
I guess like it's like it could be said that like Cole, or not Cole, but I guess Cole realized Jacob survives the crash.
Yeah.
So he wants a survivor,
Mm-hmm.
and he thinks he can do something more for this test than for this wild.
Yeah.
So, because the whole time he's like, you've made it so far, because he's been watching him the whole time. Like, you've made it this far, you keep making it this far, you're clearly our survivor for this story. Now it's time to see, will you still survive my alpha, or will my alpha win?
Yeah, that and Danny as well, because he even made the comment where he's like, and you surviving all the way from Europa.
Yeah.
You know, so.
I think that's kind of, I guess that is what he wanted, is he wanted people that are capable of surviving these situations to get to the end. Then.
Right. Yeah, and I would like him to see, or
I just wish I kind of understood more than what the point of was the serum that he took, because Cole wanted that after he had taken it from the Alpha, he wanted it to create his super soldier.
I think because the Alpha died, he just wanted the genetic material to continue experimenting, you know, to try and create or manufacture the Alpha rather than having to, you know, evolution it from the wild, I guess.
I guess, but then that just doesn't make sense why it was then just a cure.
Yeah.
Because then how are they going to create an Alpha with something that cures the biophage?
I think it was just probably like analyzing the genetics or something. I don't know. That's like doctor.
I know, like that's the part I just don't know. Like I wish I could have understood that a little bit more.
Yeah,
and what they were going to try to do.
I do want to get more from this mysterious faction. Because it is established like there's obviously a group behind this evolutionary ideal. So I want to see some more, because that was one of the most interesting parts of the Dead Space franchise, was the whole the church and the people that worshipped these people transforming into the necromorphs, and they saw it as a way of like the great passing or whatever. So yeah, I'd like to see some more from that, and I think it's a cool premise. But that aside, I don't think there's anything else we really missed as far as discussing the story. I do highly recommend you check out the Callisto Protocol Helix Station if you're interested. It's just a 6-part audio story that kind of leads up into the events of the game. I thought it was really good. And yeah.
And so if you're out there going to try and play the game, you know, we have Dylan's little slogan here of dodge, slap, repeat.
Oh yeah, I forgot I put that in there. I was thinking back to like Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise, the whole live, die, repeat. This game could have had its title box art just be like dodge, slap, repeat.
So if you're out there, definitely give it a try. If you're already trying it, remember that slogan, and good luck.
Yeah. So with that, we just want to take a moment to thank you guys for listening if you made it this far. If you're interested in giving us a follow on social media, we are on Twitter and Instagram if you check the description of this episode. We also post our videos on YouTube if you want to check us out there. Other than that, we hope you guys have the best of times as we approach the end of the year here. Yeah, happy holidays. Look forward to our upcoming lists. Like we mentioned, we're going to be summarizing our favorite releases this year. And with that, we hope to catch you guys in the next episode, and we hope you guys have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.